today we're going to talk about where that magic cube that appears in God when Faye goes there comes from, which mythology it would be from, and what that sword would be. And also why these new characters might indicate that Faye is actually a character from another story as well, besides Norse mythology. Let's go.
Okay, I think they're gone.
Just be careful. Fresh air.
Iron. Different.
You are cube.
I'm talking. Know what? It doesn't matter.
How do we get out of here?
Yeah, we've tried. There's no way out. Then you're a talking sword. I'm not the sword. I'm the ribbons, obviously. And my name is Rue. The cube is Frank.
Well, for those who don't know what's going on, right? The book about Faye came out, and in that trailer, you see Faye going to the world of the dead, of the gods, and being put in a prison. And inside that prison, she ends up meeting her companions in the story, kind of like her own Atreus, right? But actually much better than Atreus himself. It's a magic sword that has a ribbon on it that talks, and also a magic cube, a cosmic cube, that also talks. I think the ribbon's name is Rue, and the cube's name is Frank. Apparently, they're new characters, at least in the trailer. But if we do a little more research, these characters might actually be mythological too. Figures from specific mythologies. And in my trailer analysis, right, where I talk about all the mythological differences that appeared, by the way, I'll leave it linked in the card in the description if you're interested. I said that this sword could be several different mythological swords. And it really could, because it matches a lot of things. First of all, because it's inside a cube, right? Being a reference, for example, to Excalibur, Graham, or even some other swords from King Arthur, like Galahad's sword, which I've already mentioned to you. In the case of Galahad's sword, according to the story, he was sitting in the lost seat at the Round Table, which is the seat reserved for the greatest knight of all, which would be him. At a certain moment, people came to call him to see what was happening outside because they saw a stone with a sword floating in the river. Then Galahad went out, and only then was he able to pull out that sword. This could also be one of the other legendary swords from King Arthur's lore. I also have a video on the channel explaining more, which I'll share with you. But after I started thinking a little more and rewatching the God of War games, I realized that they had already started mixing the mythologies long before Laufey showed up in God of War. They even mixed characters from the mythologies, right? For example, Kratos himself in Norse mythology is playing the role of Farbauti, who is Loki's father in Norse mythology. And another very clear example is at the end of God of War Ragnarok when the Kelpie appears, which is a Celtic creature. And at the very end of God of War Ragnarok, when they get off the Kelpie to talk to the Norns, a little Celtic tune starts playing.
Enough.
The hideout of destiny, and the Norns themselves call Mimir, who is actually a real Norse god, a Vanir god. Puck, the good hunting Robin, Robin Goodfellow. And Puck is a character who is part of Shakespeare's story, right? A Midsummer Night's Dream. He's a fairy, goblin, hobgoblin, anyway. He's very famous, and nowadays, he's even part of Celtic mythology.
You pitiful archetypes seek to break free from the script, as if knowing the lines would guarantee the power to change them.
Be clear.
You will die, Kratos of Sparta.
But if he destroys fate, there must also be a way to change it.
There is no fate, Puck.
Well, thinking about it, that this sword could be several legendary swords combined into one in the God of War universe, I narrowed it down to the idea that this sword might actually be a combination of just two swords. Thinking about that, and also the fact that in the trailer itself, the question comes up whether Faye would be worthy of picking up the sword, right?
Rue? Rue, you should give her the sword.
Do I know I can trust her?
I'll give it back.
I promise.
Okay. Take it.
So which two swords am I thinking of? Well, that sword there could be both Graham and Excalibur in one sword, because both have extremely similar stories. Let's begin with Excalibur, the more famous of the two. Excalibur is both the sword in the stone and the sword from the lake that King Arthur later recovers. In fact, a lot of people in the shorts I made explaining this theory told me that no, Excalibur is not the name of the sword in the stone. The sword in the stone doesn't have a name. So I have this book about King Arthur, Le Morte d'Arthur, by Thomas Mallory. He's the only author who wrote a complete story about King Arthur with a beginning, middle, and end. The rest are fragmented stories scattered around. He unites them all into one. And here he does call it Excalibur at times, both as the sword from the stone and the sword from the lake. But I'll tell you the story, right, in a very summarized way. Merlin needed to make Arthur become king. So he took a sword, put it in a stone, and made it so that only Arthur could pull that sword out. Because whoever pulled the sword from the stone would be the King of England, right? The King of Britain. Arthur manages to pull out this sword. It's a sword that shines brighter than the sun itself, and he defeats many people with it. But at a certain point, he ends up facing a warrior named Pellinore, who breaks his sword. And Merlin takes him to the lake, where there are several ladies of the lake, not just one, but many. And in that lake, there's a hand holding the sword out with a scabbard. They go there. Arthur takes this sword, and Merlin tells him to be careful not to lose the sword scabbard, because it's not the sword that's important, but the scabbard. As long as Arthur held it, he couldn't die in battle. That's the summary of Excalibur. And now let's move on to Graham so you can see how extremely similar it is. But before that, you could like the video, subscribe to the channel and all that you already know, and also consider becoming a member here. You'll get early access to videos and also exclusive videos, like the ones showing up on the screen, and your name will be immortalized here, just like everyone who's showing up there, all right? You can also help by purchasing the products on the screen. I included books about King Arthur, horror, and Norse mythology if you're interested. And also the PlayStation 5 at a good price, which I don't know how long will last, but keep clicking there, or you can also check the links in the pinned comment, all right? But make sure to subscribe because there are a lot of mythology videos. A lot of content, a lot of analysis comes out every week here on the channel. Well, getting back, right, as I said, there was a wedding going on, and at this wedding, an older man came in disguised, and this wedding was for the daughter of King Volsumbo. Her name was Sigurd, if I'm not mistaken. Well, this old man, he went right into the middle of the wedding, and there was a tree holding up the roof. He stuck a sword into it, and he said that whoever could pull that sword out would be a great warrior king. In other words, very similar to the story of King Arthur, and that old man was none other than Odin. Everyone tried to pull out the sword, but only Sigmund, King Volsumbo's youngest son, succeeded. Sigmund became a great warrior, but at a certain point, look how similar it is, huh? At a certain moment, Odin thought Sigmund's time was over, and he went after him, also in disguise, using the spear. And he struck the sword and broke it. Up to that point, everything was fine, okay? But at a certain moment, the descendant of Sigmund, Sigurd, or Siegfried, whichever way you want to call him, he needed to defeat a dragon called Fafnir. And to defeat this dragon, he needed a sword. But every sword they made for him would break. It just wouldn't work. He took the broken sword from his father's grave to the blacksmith Regan to have it reforged. With the new sword, he defeated the dragon Fafnir. In other words, the two stories are extremely similar, and I think Goro Griffith already has this habit of mixing mythologies, which I actually find pretty interesting. I do think that this sword is both Graham and Excalibur in one. It's known as Graham by the Norse, and as Excalibur by the Celts, or Britons, or everyone, right? Because the Celtic people are quite numerous. Okay, but now moving on to the magic cube, right? Obviously, this cube isn't just anything. It's no coincidence they got an actor from The Boys to play him, right? I think maybe at the end of the game or in the middle of the game. We'll likely have a big reveal about Magic Cube's identity, similar to when Troz was revealed as Loki in 2018. I saw the leak on Griffith Laufey as the third figure, and it was pretty accurate, wasn't it? It said there would be this magic cube, there would be a sword, etc., and it mentioned that this sword would have connections to Merlin. So it could be that this magic cube, Frank, is actually Merlin. And Rui could be the Lady of the Lake, Nimue, or even Morgana. But there's another interesting theory. It was actually a friend of mine, Lucas Cerritos do Mundo, who told me that maybe Faye, you know? Faye, right? Faye herself might also turn out to be a character from another mythology, besides also being Laufey from Norse mythology. Because in fact, she exists in Norse mythology. Maybe Faye will end up going into Celtic mythology as well, and be called Morgana Le Fay. In the tales of King Arthur, she would be an enemy of King Arthur, or maybe even, and this is my own theory, Laufey might play the Lady of the Lake, who gave King Arthur the sword. At some point, she had to raise her arm through the lake, and a portal performs the famous Lady of the Lake scene, holding out the sword to King Arthur before anyone mentions that Mimir already discussed it. That Nimue is another character, not Laufey. Like I told you, there are several Ladies of the Lake. In fact, one of them has already appeared in God of War Ragnarok. She's that mermaid who forges things. But honestly, I'm really interested to see what they're going to do. I'm really looking forward to seeing King Arthur because he's my favorite character. He's my favorite mythological hero. But leave your thoughts about this theory in the comments. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm out of my mind? Do you think it makes sense? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share. I'll see you next time. Okay, take this.